Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Look at this story. Look at this. Scientific journal paper suggests making it a federal hate crime to criticize Fauci. That's a story in the National Pulse. I'll read. A scientific journal article authored by Professor Peter Hotez, a frequent guest on corporate media networks, called to, quote, extend federal hate crime protections for scientists facing criticism from alleged far-right extremists, according to including National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director Anthony Fauci. Now, it's true, I couldn't believe it, but I looked up the original scholarly paper. I wonder what Dr. Feynman, if he were still around, would say about all these journals that are just politics dressed up as science. Mounting anti-science aggression in the United States. Oh, wow. There is a troubling new expansion of anti-science aggression in the United States. It's arising from far-right extremism, including some elected members of the U.S. Congress, and conservative news outlets that target prominent biological scientists fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, is that a scientific term, far-right extremism? I wonder how many genders scientist Peter Hotez thinks there are. I wonder if he believes in science or in politics. I'm kidding, I already know. And by the way, I can tell you as many people on the left oppose this new science-y corporate lockdown cult as people on the right do. Just ask Naomi Wolf or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A band of ultra-conservative members of the U.S. Congress and other public officials with far-right leanings are waging organized and seemingly well-coordinated attacks against prominent U.S. biological scientists. In parallel, conservative news outlets repeatedly and purposefully promote disinformation designed to portray key American scientists as enemies. Okay, so we know if he thinks there are ultra-conservative members of Congress. We know if that's what he thinks, we know where he's positioned himself. He's on the far left himself. He posits a conspiracy theory that there's some sort of coordination to this, like some master control switch or something, because it's impossible for this scientician to believe that people would naturally and on their own possibly be critical of the biggest civil liberties attack in our history. I love that one line, purposely promote disinformation. Again, he just cannot believe that anyone would truly disagree with him. So they must knowingly be lying, not actually expressing an alternative point of view. I don't think he's very sciencey. I don't think he follows Feynman's rule. And then he plays the victim, which is unusual for a scientician. As a consequence, many of us receive threats via email and on social media, while some are stalked at home to create an unprecedented culture of anti-science intimidation. Now, I've had a few death threats in my life that were real enough and scary enough that I believed they were a risk. And I know what I did. I called the police. And in one case, the police called me to tell me about it. And I know what I didn't do. I didn't write a long academic paper about it and publish it to the world in some sort of pity party. That's just not how it really is if you're really scared, as opposed to just being a crybaby, a thin-skinned, dish-it-out but can't take it critic. This isn't science, this is punditry. But here's what this guy considered to be a hate crime. In June, the Republicans organized a House Select Subcommittee on the origins of COVID-19 with the presumption that it was ignited by gain-of-function genetic engineering research from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, despite evidence pointing to spillover from a viral infection in bats to additional mammals and ultimately humans accounting for previous coronavirus epidemics. The hearings took on a sinister tone, pointing fingers at virologists both in the US and China. Got it. So there was a sinister tone. Yeah, I think so. Given that we're talking about funding biological warfare research in China, I'd call that sinister. A disease that has killed millions and destroyed our free way of life. Yeah, these are sinister issues. But you see, he's trying to shut down that scientific process of inquiry that Feynman talked about. Have a hypothesis and test it. He does not want his hypothesis tested. Alongside the June Republican COVID-19 origins hearing, Senator Ron Johnson organized a roundtable in Milwaukee to highlight the rare adverse side effects from COVID-19 vaccines. Okay, so help me out. Is it sciencey to talk about side effects, or does science say we can't talk about it? Is this guy saying side effects don't happen, or that you can only talk about them in a certain way, or only the right people can talk about it? And shouldn't this whole thing here be in a private diary as opposed to an academic paper? During a June 2021 interview with the staunchly conservative Florida governor, a Fox News anchor referred to me as infamous and notorious. Infamous, notorious. Those are adjectives, they're criticisms. But illegal hate crimes? Hey, buddy, you just called the people you hate a bunch of names, but they can't call you names back? Is that science? Is that what this is about in a scientific journal? The America First element of the far right focuses on nativism, anti-immigration, and a foreign policy built around strong military buildup and deterrence and confrontation with China. I thought we were talking about a virus. You're talking about Trump now and foreign policy? He goes on to talk about Hitler and Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil. Frankly, it was a roller coaster of emotions. I really felt like I was reading a personal diary, and I shouldn't be learning so much about his feelings. He was just oversharing. But then this scientist came up with his advice, which you can't criticize because then you're criticizing science itself, you see. We should look at expanded protection mechanisms for scientists currently targeted by far-right extremism in the United States. Representative Paul Tonko has introduced a bill known as the Scientific Integrity Act of 2021 to protect U.S. government scientists from political interference. But this needs to be extended for scientists at private research universities and institutes. Still, another possibility is to extend federal hate crime protections. Got it. Are you sure that this is all science? To protect you from criticism? Isn't criticism an essential part of science? Isn't it, in fact, the basis of all science? As Feynman said, the process of doubting everything, everyone, especially the experts. He makes one last mention of the Holocaust. As Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel once pointed out, neutrality or silence favors the oppressor. We must take steps to protect our scientists and take swift and positive action to counter the growing wave of far-right anti-science aggression. Not taking action is a tacit endorsement and a guarantee that the integrity and productivity of science in the United States will be eroded or lose ground. Now, I'm not sure if any violence is being done to any scientist in America. And obviously, I'm against violence. But of all the people I've mentioned here, the only one who was brutally attacked was Republican Senator Rand Paul. Fauci's critic was attacked. He was attacked and had his ribs broken, serious injuries by a left-wing Trump hater. Anti-science aggression. You know, I think the anti-science aggression is coming from this snowflake who wants to shut up everyone who disagrees with him. It's a laugh. It's embarrassing. It's a joke. It's not science. But you know what? He's actually getting his way. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.